So I'm proud to start New Game with a keynote from a man who knows what it takes to make a robust platform. Our first presenter has touched nearly every category and job title since he first began in the video game industry over 20 years ago. From writing copy protection utilities to soldering cables to designing and building hundreds of racetracks and settling labor actions on movie sets, he has tried nearly everything. Perhaps best known for his early design and production work on EA Sports staples such as the much-loved John Madden football and NHL hockey, he's also made over 20 fantasy role-playing, military, and action games. He joined EA as one of their first 20 employees and is currently Chief Creative Director for Electronic Arts. So I am proud to introduce Mr. Rich Hilleman to kick off New Game.
Thank you. Good morning. Oh, I'm going to press the talk button. Oh, it doesn't matter. Anyway, how are you this morning? It's an early morning for engineering. That means that at least 1/3 of the people here have not been to bed yet, I believe. What I thought I'd try and do is talk a little bit about platforms today. I will have a bad demo, but I will do my best. So there you go. So I've been around gaming platforms for a long time, and for the most part, I've seen some good ones come and go. Who in here has a PlayStation 3? That's a good number. So maybe you'll know this, and I don't mean to pick on my friends from Sony. This is pretty typical of the 360 and even the Wii. But typically what happens now is if I go buy a new game at GameStop, I take it home and I put it in the tray and I press close, and it says, oh, you need a system update to run this game. And so 30 minutes later, after that systems update has loaded and installed, then it tries to run the game. The game says, oh, you need a game update to run this game. 20 minutes later, you get the game update. And then at which point it says, what? Oh, you need another systems update to run the new update of the game. So it's roughly 65, 70 minutes before I get to the point of getting to actually install the game and watch all the videos before I actually get to play. This is progress. I once had a platform where I put a cartridge in and I pressed the button and it ran like right away. I have an Apple II at home that used to boot in 40 seconds. Where have we gone? Let me explain why I think that's important. Increasingly, the capacity that we are arguing for with our customer is not their money, it is their time. And when we spend 60 and 70 minutes of that time not entertaining them, we're not doing our job and we're likely to lose them. Almost all of the new customers who have shown up, and that's 90% of the people who are playing games today, were not playing a console game 2 years ago. Those people only give us their attention because we give them their time effectively on phones and other Facebook's-like games that are instant on. So instant on is very important, and we've kind of lost the tail there. So the question I have is, why can't I have that everywhere? So this is kind of about that journey for us at Electronic Arts. We started kind of playing around with HTML5 a little while ago. Poppet was an example of that. We worked early on the Chrome with that, with Seth among others. That was a good trick for us. We were lucky in that our friends at Poppet have been in the business so long that their Java essentially has no external outside call, so it was a fast translation process. Lords of Ultima is also on Chrome as an HTML5 and HTML4 product. That's been shipping for more than a year. And Dragon Age Legends is a free-to-play Facebook game that also has a mobile component. The mobile component for that product was actually built in HTML5. So we've been kind of playing with this for a while. This summer we had a few resources that we don't usually have. And that is a guy named Jeff Litz. Jeff is one of the best low-level programmers in the business. He's written most of our rollout shaders and low-level graphics platform support APIs since the PlayStation 1 at Electronic Arts, one of the very best people we have at that. We have an art director named Terry Smith. Terry was the art director on the God of War title that many of you know about. And then we had a team of approximately 8 people from Carnegie Mellon's Entertainment and Technology Center. So we tried to build a little bit of an application to see how far we could push things. So hopefully this is going to now work. Oh, no, no audio. So lest you think that's just a video, we're going to try and move the camera around a little bit here. So that's a full 3D object. This is essentially a character called Buggy from a product that we were building for the PlayStation 2. Oh, let's all get sick. And so we were building a PlayStation 2-based title with a lot of these same characters almost 5 years ago. It would have been a character action title for that particular platform. It had great people working on it. For some reason, we couldn't figure out how to get it to the finish line, but it represented about $3 million in art assets that we had laying around that were exactly at the resolution that we were after. And so what we did was we challenged the folks at CMU to see what they could do with it. We're pretty happy with the results, and I think we're going to continue to work on it because we think there are great potential to essentially build a PlayStation 2 grade platform on WebGL and an HTML5 as a construct. The piece of hardware I'm running on here is a 3-year-old MacBook Air. It is literally the second version of the Air that was ever made. Those of you who know, that is not fabulous pieces of hardware. We think this kind of represents a real low dollar mark that's about a year away. So from my perspective, that represents a mass platform that's available to a lot of people that will increasingly be mobilely enabled. So we learned kind of a lot of things from that. And I would say that kind of some things that went well were surprisingly good performance on the right configuration. And let me talk about that for a second. We had some pretty shocking results with this particular application. So it runs pretty good on this machine. Mr. Litz's 4-year-old Lenovo laptop it ran pretty well on. I have an i7-based NVIDIA machine in my particular desk, and not on Chrome, but on another browser, I could not get more than about 12 frames per second on a $3,400 piece of hardware without changing my browser configuration substantially. At the same time, a literally $300 netbook that somebody was using to hold up their monitor ran it at 24 frames per second. I do not know how to explain that to a customer. That is a big, big problem. Customers need to understand that something's going to run when they pay for it, and when I can't predict it, when I can't describe the conditions of success, that is an enormous, enormous marketing challenge. So we'll talk more about that. We got very good leverage. I think that our code bases generally ran fast. We managed to make quick performances, although Jeff Litz would not allow me to share any of his JavaScript with any of you, not out of some great sense of proprietary, but because he thought it was the ugliest thing he'd ever seen in his life. Some things that didn't go so well were sound. We continue to kind of falter with sound. Mr. Lucas says that sound is 51% of the experience. Anybody who's been in the video game business knows what a profound effect of video games is with and without sound. We just have to resolve that. I hear there's good opportunity, there's lots of folks working on the problem. I have some hope that the next revisions of the browsers will address that, but it's a big deal. I just talked a little bit about the configuration, performance, predictability. It is so important that a customer understands what they're getting. That is a form of friction I cannot underemphasize. High performance JavaScript is obtuse at best. Jeff had to write code to essentially fool the x86 output that he was after. And he was looking at both sides of the code generation. The things he had to do were awful. For us, the size of the demo that you saw in front of you was the size of the demo that would not produce a garbage collection event for us. And currently, garbage collection events produce profound, up to a second pause in the middle of an action game. That will not work. So either I need to know it's coming, or I need to have more control over it than I have today. Finally, digital platform performance is as important as client. That means all of the ways that you deliver that code to the user has a lot to do with that instant-on experience that I think is so important for this customer base. So how far are we from a commercial gaming platform out there? My goals was to have kind of a PlayStation 2 grade console immersive platform that runs on open architectures. That means essentially bringing what's currently BioWare class PC titles, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, the new Star Wars game, to the web. Bring some of the console titles that can make the transition. And by the way, that's about 75% of our titles we think could run on this platform today. To serve as a client engine for larger MMO style titles. Who in here has played the Star Wars MMO beta? Anybody? Oh, we got one. Do you remember how big the install was? Yeah, it's a little big. It's on the high side at 20 gigs. For me, that's a big problem. The ideal solution to that is obviously an HTML5 WebGL client, which is instant on wherever you are. So for us, I think it's the future of MMO clients too. Finally, it expands our access to other systems. Chrome, both Chrome and Explorer and Opera and Safari are all great opportunities for us, but so are Google TV and Android tablets and iOS devices and other IPTVs that are out there. Those are essentially consoles in the future without consoles. So here's my checklist of what I have found in the past is necessary to have a viable commercial platform. Number one is you need a platform definition to communicate the customer and developer expectations. Hardware platforms do this by spending a bunch of money on hardware, spending a bunch of money on the launch of that hardware, on development systems, on making a big deal about it. That's not how things are going to work in this case. This is going to be an open launch. That means it's going to put a lot more pressure on us to do that communication correctly. Generally, in the past, they have had a certification process to ensure quality and compliance. That's usually about two things. The first thing is to make sure that there's a certain quality threshold on the platform because retailers in a brick and mortar environment demand it. The second reason is to make sure that the software is going to run on future versions of the machine. Again, we're not going to get to accomplish this. I can't imagine any of you are going to sit still for somebody certifying your software on an open platform, and I understand that. That means that we have to figure out how to serve that role in some other way for our customers. In particular, certification as to what's going to run on the platform. That gets back to the platform performance stuff I was talking about earlier. Finally, distribution to all potential customers of both the platform and the products that run on it. This cycles a little bit into how you pay for it, but I want to talk about this quickly right now. Increasingly on open platforms and on the newly emerging platforms, we do not get paid at the door. Meaning I do not get paid when somebody downloads an app or buys a license or something like that. That's not how it works. I have to get people playing that game before they're willing to pay me. That means that as many distribution outlets as I can for that application I want to use. So traditionally, if I'm trying to manage a pay-for-app application, going through Marketplace or through the iTunes Store is a very important part of that equation. But when I'm trying to get paid in-app, the more ways I can get that application or a link distributed, the more customers I can acquire. So it changes the equation a lot when you don't get paid at the door. When you get paid on the way out the door, you want the maximum distribution possible from all possible sites. You need a vehicle to communicate specific title quality. What is an underutilized and underappreciated thing that the hardware console manufacturers do is they tend to put a spotlight on what they think are great products. They spend marketing money, they spend PR attention on showing what they think are the best products on their platform so that customers understand how to set their expectations for the future. In our case, that's going to be up to us in a democratic process that our customers decide what are the best products, but it's also going to be up to us to listen more carefully than we would otherwise do. Our customers need a way to pay for it. So although this little trick that I showed you was not desperately expensive, my ambition is to build products that compete with our PC titles. And those are budgets that are on the high side of $10 million. I have to pay those bills. I think some of you would like to get paid too, I think. Is that okay? So our customers need a way to pay for that. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I think every platform to launch successfully needs a killer app, an application that people use to describe to other people why they have to buy or use that platform. In most cases, in the case of hardware platforms, those have been driven by first-party software. Halo is probably that particular product for the 360. Gran Turismo or Spyro was for the various Sony platforms. For Nintendo, there's always been a Miyamoto product of great value to drive those platforms. And the handhelds, you all have your examples. We're going to talk about another one in a little bit. Finally, there has to be some magic about it, something that drives the customers to want to tell their friends about it, to share those moments. So who's going to do that? All of us are, because there isn't going to be a central platform company. That means we have to accept the responsibility for evangelizing our particular platform and for working together for its long-term value. Most of those things that I described, by the way, on the checklist are simply answers to questions that customers ask. So I'm going to work this backwards from the questions that the customers are asking. Number one is platform definition and certification process. What the player is really saying is, what does a platform look like, and how will I know what works on my client? I remember there was once another open gaming platform. Some of you maybe remember this. And what made it a gaming platform was Microsoft Flight Simulator. Those of you who are about my age, maybe a little younger, will remember PC Magazine used to do tests of new PC hardware when it came out. And in the lower right-hand corner was a little box that would have some numbers on it. And it was like a benchmark, some goofy benchmark that none of us understood, and then another goofy benchmark that none of us understood. And then below that was Microsoft Flight Simulator frame rate. We all knew what that meant. To some extent, that's a successful killer application on an open platform. It defined the platform. In fact, it was used to define compatibility with the platform for the better part of a decade. That kind of an application allows your customers to use that as an index into your platform, to understand how other products entering are relative to that product, both in quality, performance, and configuration. So we need to develop the application that is this. Maybe it's Angry Birds. Maybe it needs to be something else that's more exemplary and specific to this platform, but there has to be a reason to show up. So game as platform definition, I would propose that we build a benchmark creating a standard expectation of computing power, GPU power, memory, sound services, game HID, we need to talk a little bit more about that, secondary storage, user ID entitlement, game storage, achievement, and community services, and other platform services, including, and this is maybe the most under-talked about thing, the standards for the services that deliver the products. That's about the performance of the servers, the performance of the bandwidth, and other things. We need to have standards for not only how well the product runs on your machine, but how it gets delivered. Fundamentally, this is an instant-on technology. If you don't meet those standards, you undercut the entire reason to exist. So here are some of the performance standards we're proposing. This essentially gets to a PlayStation 2 grade configuration. We're trying to think in terms of how do I produce deeply immersive products to customers on these platforms. There's no reason we can't have them. By the way, I'll figure out with Seth how to let you guys have these slides. So this gives you some idea of what it looks like. These are relatively modest, but we can get a lot done on these today. We've been running on relatively finite platforms for quite some time. This is really something we can get a lot done. The other thing is those service capacity standards. So it talks about what the PSU standards are, how many different users you need to support, what your performance is against that. These are all important considerations that we have never thought about before in an open platform. Bad user experience on this half here, bad experience on the delivery of the service, will kill the platform as fast as any other mistake we make, maybe faster. So how do we get there? Well, we need to get some of our games to help set and communicate what a player's client can do. That means that we have to make our games, once they play it on that system, tell the user system something about its performance standards so that the next game that shows up knows what's going on, and maybe so services like Marketplace can query that information and filter the offerings to a user so that you'll only get the things that will run on his system. It's extremely important to meet those users' expectations. These are big mass markets. The ones we're talking about are 40 and 50 million wide. These are not people who are going to deal with configuration details. That is not where they're going to spend their time. Finally, this as I described, it allows us to filter those offerings for the user. So the next part of the checklist is distribution to all potential customers, a vehicle to communicate product quality, and a way to pay for it. Really what the player is saying there is, what am I getting? How do I know if it's any good? And how do I have to pay for it and when? So how do they pay for it today? Increasingly for the products that we distribute that are not on console, that are not a packaged goods brick and mortar title, increasingly we're getting paid in-game, either in microtransaction-based, on subscription service-based applications, in secondary upgrades or user services that we provide to that user in that context. Increasingly, the game is simply the carrier for those transactions. That means that fundamentally for this particular platform to survive, we need to have a way to do commerce in-game in a standardized way that customers trust. There are some subscription service models out there that are still working in some of the MMO spaces. That clearly is still available. We've also seen some interest of that in the sports category, something that not lots of other people participate in. But for us, that looks like a viable circumstance. Sometimes what they want is content, and they want to pay you in content. In other words, they want to do things for you that you can sell to other customers. Sometimes that microtransaction model has to go in both directions with your customer. Finally, advertising. Advertising is increasingly getting to be a non-traditional way. Banner ads are a dead form in games. Nothing will get your game killed faster than that. On the other hand, properly executed in-game contextual advertising, that is using products in context in the game in the right way, you can produce very good return on investment for your advertisers and not alienate your customers at the same time. Some details. So there are in-game ads. That's increasingly, as I described, a different kind of a thing itself. Those, you need to increasingly give tools to your advertisers and to people who sell those about who actually gets impacted by that advertising. If you do not have that, you will find you can't sell ads, period. You need to be able to execute an in-game microtransaction, which includes a checkout, virtual currency support for both debit and credit cards, and other forms of monetization. You need to be able to maintain a virtual goods inventory. This back end ends up being a hell of a lot more work than you think it is. SimSocial, we spent a tremendous amount of time making sure that these systems ran, and we keep working on them every day. Catalog management, which is a piece of that, how do you surface those offerings? Transaction records that my accounting people believe. In my particular case, I need to pay taxes, and it's very important that I get reported where my transactions take place, because state governments today have absolutely no sense of humor about not getting paid their taxes. Finally, some support interface, some way for the customer to get help. And that's an unanswered question ahead of us today, is how do we solve that particular problem? Finally, some mechanism for subscription management for those who execute that. These are all attributes of your back-end system that your client barely knows about. These are extremely important for this particular business to work. This is kind of the last thing. I want you guys to think carefully about this. So HTML5 is maybe the most democratic platform that we have. And all of the other democratized platforms, iOS, the other web products that we build today on Facebook, for instance, they work with very large audiences. And the larger those audiences, the more value-oriented customers you acquire. The more value-oriented customers, the more of a problem credit card transactions become. So a couple of things to think about in that context. There are two major cable companies in the US that take more than 50% of their revenue is in cash or cash equivalents. I didn't say checks, I said cash. That means people show up at a retailer and hand money to somebody and get a receipt. That mechanism for us today is a problem. There are two major game retailers in the world that I know of who have exactly the same number, that see more than 50% of their business in cash or cash equivalents. For a value-oriented customer, it means we're going to need to figure out how to let those people pay us when they don't have the traditional electronic mechanism for payment. So, increasingly we're going to need to figure out how to get paid in chickens. That's the joke we talk about it in-house, is can you take chickens yet? The chase for all the ways to monetize, to take currency, to take virtual currency, to take other value from our customers as a way to get compensated for our products, that's going to be a key race over the next several years. And by the way, innovation in that space will have high return. So last couple of items. A killer app and some magic. Ultimately, what your audience is asking is, what do I tell my friends? A lot of the times when we build great games at Electronic Arts, we think in terms of what is the story that our customer is going to tell their friends that will move them to try that product. We try and craft that story, and often in our tests with audiences, this is actually the question we want to know at the end of the day, is how will they tell their friends about this game? To get that done right, you need to do a few different things. So first of all, you need to determine where is your magic going to come from? What is the thing that they're going to tell people? And I'm telling you, I think HTML's magic is time. Its ability to transcend the time that I have to play games, to be where I want to be, and to instantly produce that gameplay for me. This is incredibly important and an incredible opportunity, especially for this expanding audience. At the end of the day, that's going to be the fight that we have, is we're going to fight with the other gaming consoles and other gaming platforms for those users' time. It's the rarest of all currency. So you guys need to figure out how to turn that into magic. I think that's this room's job, and I think most of you are really capable of it. So, I went and talked to Houdini about magic. He says, what the eyes see and the ears hear, the mind believes. My ambition is not to make Facebook games. My ambition is to make the same kind of immersive experiences I've always made. Those have deep, impactful impacts on people. They produce deep narratives that they share with other people. Most importantly, they produce high ARPUs. And I think at the end of the day, that's the other thing you're kind of interested in. So from my perspective, I think there's a tremendous opportunity in the immersive space. Those of you who want to come with us, I think there are things that we can do together. Electronic Arts' ambition is that this is an open platform and that we need to work with the developer, user, and customer community to make it successful. And at the end of the day, I hope we can get your help. So thanks a lot, and I'll answer some questions, I hope. Thanks. Starting to talk like Jeff Huber. Anyway, anybody got any questions? Oh, shucks. Come on, it's not that early. You're gonna let me off this early? All right. Oh,
not at all.
What a man, what a guy.
So the question about benchmarking the
Yep.
client platform is of particular interest. Do you have any ideas about how you can actually write, in-browser code that's going to quantify how well the user's machine is going to run a given title, or actually a range of titles, ideally?
Yeah, so my point of view is you build the game first that people will play, and then you instrument the game. I mean, the hard part is to get enough people to play it, that it produces the useful outcome for you. So I think that we wish that application would do a couple of things. Number one is to store that information locally in some fashion. And there are lots of different ways to do that. And I'm sure that my friends at Google have strong opinions about how to do that correctly. And second of all, to broadcast that back to us so we can start to profile what that platform really looks like. But I think that's a cooperative project, and I think that we want the browser manufacturers like Google to be a part of that conversation. Seth and I have talked about this for a while. We've actually thought at one point in time it may be 3 or 4 different applications that define a few different performance profiles. But increasingly, it looks like we can have one that does the job.
Yeah, that's really the question. I mean, how well does one title generalize to sort of overall performance of the machine?
Yeah, I think that if you're making an immersive, hardware-accelerated 3D product, it turns out that you're actually testing kind of all the pieces just in a different way. We found that, at least in our experiences so far, that it maps pretty well to 2D performance. When we looked at our 2D games and mapped them to what we were seeing out of our kind of bleeding-edge 3D games, the profiles tended to look the same, meaning something ran good on one ran on all of them.
Cool, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Crafting the stories that the audience wants to share.
Yep.
How is it different between a sports game and a more, I guess, designed game that's like external from these natural emotional curves that sports games have?
You mean the free context that they get?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that what you have to do is you have to have what people tell stories, they don't tell the big story, they tell the little story. So they tell about a moment. In John Madden football, they talk about the interception they made that was a one-handed twisting backwards catch to save a touchdown at the end. Now, in fact, what they did was they pressed the X button, but that's all that happened for them. That's the narrative that they want to tell, but it's about that moment. Usually what it's about is it's the kill shot in Battlefield 3, or it's, when I walked around my house in my underwear for 3 days in Sim Social. It's those little moments that are funny to people that serve as that social lubricant. They're not big narratives, they're not novels, they're little quips of time. We try hard to make sure that we've identified what those are in the game. They're the little moments of delight, and they usually turn into those stories.
Good, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
In the work that you've done so far, have you had any luck stopping client-side cheating?
So this is a great story. In almost 30 years of being in this business, everybody likes to talk about cheating. So when I was in the single player business, my attitude was, I don't care. And the reason why is you bought it, you want to cheat, that's your way. If you want to cheat at solitaire, that's between you and the cards. I don't really care. The problem is in an online gaming context, sometimes it matters to other people. We're pretty good nowadays at understanding what that's going on. So Battlefield 3, we have lots and lots of ways to watch how people play that game, and we know what is not possible. We know we understand our laws of physics well because we wrote them. And when people suddenly violate those laws of physics, it's pretty clear what's going on. We have a variety of ways of dealing with that. Sometimes it's aftermarket software they're using and people don't understand the effect they have. We try and be sympathetic in that case and corrective. In other cases, people are being predatory and not so nice ways. We have some responsibility to the rest of our community.
Thank you.
Sir?
Yeah, how do you find the current tooling that you guys are using to produce games maps to the web platform? Can you find that you can output content that suits itself well to the web, or are you having to kind of start from scratch in the tools department?
Let's see here. So my chief form of feedback on this is my friend Jeff, who sits about 30 feet away, and I can't really share the words that he's been using for the last several months. For the most part, what I would say is we wish there were more. A year ago at this time, there was nothing. It was painful. There have been a number of tools, and I had my fine list and I left it behind. But the number of things that we've been able to use in the next year has been at least 24 pieces of software that have made our lives easier that did not exist a year ago. What we see is a flood of new tools coming. Also, the browsers themselves have dramatically improved their debugging capabilities, and that has helped us a lot. There are some things that operate at the low level between where WebGL meets the hardware or where JavaScript meets WebGL, where funny things happen and we can't always explain them. And that's some of the places we need to spend some more time. We kind of cheat. We will work our way up from the hardware if we have to. And so in most cases, we've been able to fix our problems. That is clearly not a scalable solution.
Hi. Well, first, thank you for sharing this with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
My question is about the payment and this stuff, which
Sure.
you said is pretty important. Since we're trying to reach like a wide market, we have like more easy ways to pay or stuff in America and Europe. But
Yep.
I would like to know if you have some suggestions or stuff in order to get these transactions done in places like Latin America.
Yeah, so both Latin America and Asia. Google's been trying to pioneer in the U.S. payment by phone. Those are both transactions that occur in great numbers in both of those markets. So for us, the Brazilian work where we've been successful in selling products in Brazil, most of those have been pay by cell. In Korea, I think it's 80% of our revenue is pay by cell. So it depends on the market. The emerging markets like Vietnam and parts of China, it's a very important commodity in those places too. But it's about chickens. I think that there are going to be virtual currencies you're going to have to support. Places like Brazil and China I believe are going to emerge virtual currencies kind of as a necessity. And then the question is, who's going to be the bank? And right now, it's the cell companies in both of those places. I think we'll see other players too.
Great, thank you. I've got two related questions.
Should we let them have two?
Well,
Okay.
it's really the
Okay.
one.
Okay.
Sorry. So you said something that I really like, that you see HTML5 as a PlayStation 2 great platform.
I think today it's a PlayStation 2 great platform.
Wow, that's even nicer to hear. And I wonder about developers and talent. How much experience from building those games for PlayStation and all that, with building large 3D games, can you reuse in HTML5 gaming? And can you just take a team that built some game and put them onto HTML5? Will they build something real? How it works with talent, with hiring and everything?
Yeah, so here's what I think is true. Great 3D gaming talent, great artists, great engineers, great designers, great producers are great on platforms because they kind of know what they're doing about people, not about technology. What they understand is how to build something that moves people. Those folks make those transitions relatively easy. My experience has been that in practice, it's about 25% of people who have been doing frontline console development today can make that transition. Some of it is interest. Some of it is the difficulty of learning an entire new stack of technology that comes with building web-based products. And some of it is adapting their tools to meet that need. We probably fought with Maya as much making HTML5 as any of other tools. It isn't because there's anything particularly wrong with Maya. We're just using it in a way we didn't intend to. And so in most cases, what's happened is we're taking tools that we've had before, using them in new ways and breaking them, and having to fix the things that we've broken. The other big tool for us, big tool learning for us for these teams is learning how to run a live service as opposed to something that ships every year. That's probably a bigger change for them than any of the technology. It's learning how to essentially sequence out a series of offerings over an extended period of time that make a product viable, and then running that at scale. We learned a lot of lessons from running SimSocial this summer. It's a wonderful problem to have when you have too many customers, but it does make your hair white prematurely. I can tell you from personal experience. Seth.
Okay, talking about the user base, so I'm curious if EA looks at the different current platforms out there, we'll say Nintendo, Xbox, Steam, whatever, and you might bring, and I don't know, do you bring specific games to each one of those platforms based on your concept of who the users are, like who you're going to be able to reach based on profile, like the type of gamer? And I'm curious how you might help us think about that in terms of the web, which is pretty much everyone has a web browser. How should we start thinking about the ubiquity of the platform versus particular type of gamers, and now is everyone a gamer?
Yeah, so let's see if I can work my way through that. There are platforms that select for players. So if you're a premier shooter console player today, you're probably going to be disproportionately a 360 player. If you are a driving game aficionado on consoles, you're going to be disproportionately a PlayStation player. It isn't because one platform is fundamentally better at the other. Forza is a great product on the 360, and Battlefield is as good on the PlayStation 3, maybe even a little better than it is on the 360. It's just those audiences gravitated. A lot of it has to do with the systems behind it. So generally, PlayStation Network does a little better job at the driving game problem of how do I deal with the latency issues on something that essentially is traveling faster than the latency issues can resolve. And Xbox is selected for the shooter problem of how do I get to play with my friends. And so what happened in those cases was it wasn't the technology, it was the choices that they made about the platform determined the audience. Interestingly enough, on the more ubiquitous platforms, on iOS, on Facebook, we find that it's everybody. There is no profile there because it's a big group. And in fact, it's all of our other players too. It's my hardest core 360 player is running around in a bikini on SimSocial. I'm not kidding. Same guy. So it is one audience, not really multiple. We increasingly think of our world as a multi-screen world, not just that they're modulating between them, but they're actually participating in them all at one time sometimes. Scarily, actually. Yes, sir?
Controls.
Controls, yes. This is an issue.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I was wondering what your insight was on the transition to getting console players on a PC.
Yeah, I think, I just came back from China, and one of the things that was striking to me was how bad they were at joystick games. And I think the reason why is there are no video consoles in China. There are only PCs, and you're hard-pressed to find a joystick there. So there's an entire generation. They have a 10-year group of kids who actually have never experienced a joystick. That's going to undercut their Predator drone skills.
Do you think that's just going to end up turning into where devices are going to be made specifically for HTML5 gaming or online gaming?
I think what we need to decide is for the customers, for the games that we're making, what is the HID that we need to support? Right now, for me, joystick support seems to be pretty hard to get accomplished, and I think that needs to change. We can get a lot done with mouses and keyboards. Shooters work really well that way, but driving games suck that way, and there's a whole category of things that we can make that you lose. Second of all, if we're talking about a mass market audience, 72 keys plus a mouse with 3 buttons says go away. It just says this is going to be more complicated than you can handle. So I don't think the 14-button PlayStation 2 controller is the answer either. That says go away just about as much. But I think that we need to understand that great games do have fundamentally specific user interfaces sometimes. We need to help with that. One of the opportunities, and it's an opportunity, is to use Android or iOS devices as controllers. And what that does is it lets us put a lot of information on the controller about how to play and what does what, as opposed to simply the X button. What the hell does the X button do? The downside is those usually have terrible haptic feedback. And for new users, that's pretty important. So we're going to have to resolve that. 5. 2 more. Yes, sir.
How do we avoid the browser wars of the late 90s and sort of standardize our platform? Because as developers, we need predictability in terms of what we're developing for. How do we let them compete and yet deliver us something that we know how to use?
Yeah, I think that's where the benchmark games really come into their fore. What from my perspective, some portion of what I'm trying to accomplish with benchmark games is to not so subtly send a message to browser manufacturers about the performance of various parts of their products. So once we get, how did Compaq and HP and IBM and Radio Shack compete in the early days of the PC business, they decided that running Microsoft Flight Simulator was important, and one of the ways they would describe the relative performance of their systems to each other. If we can get the browser manufacturers to think about games that same way, we will win. Yes, sir. I'm trying to get everybody in.
Yeah, slightly more social side. Dynadash and Farmville are not Battlefield and
Nope.
Dead Space.
Nope.
Right? How do you handle the more mature gaming, like Dead Space, in the browser, where it's, as you say, more ubiquitous?
Well, I think we have to make decisions about how much we demand out of the user from a user interface in those games. I don't know
Are
if
those games going to go away, though? Because
No, I don't think so at all. So I think that what you're going to do is take more responsibility for helping the user make choices. So we've built a very scary game called Dead Space, which makes people crap their pants. We built a pretty interesting iOS version of that called Extraction, which is essentially a rail shooter. So we took what was a 3D shooter on one platform and turned it into really something quite different on another. I think you need to think in terms of that ease of entry. That is a core component of it, but that doesn't invalidate good cases. There are great arcade games made in the 80s that had 2 buttons and 1 joystick.
I wasn't really talking about the playability, though. It was more the access, like to underage gamers to that kind of mature gaming.
Good question. We're currently ESRB members. I believe in all likelihood, when we start doing full-scale releases on HTML5, we will probably live within those standards. What's interesting is I don't know if they have, in fact, I know for a fact, they have no mechanism to review today.
Yeah.
We're still likely to try and live under that. We'd go to an RP with guidance, and we'd wait for ESRB to catch up. But we've tried very hard to support them. We really think that's a good thing. We're one of the companies that tries pretty hard to say that's really on that side of the line, and we have a lot on this side. We really don't, we make about 2 M titles a year, and we'll make about 60 that are T, and so for us, it is important to separate the two. Ultimately, in the console game business, it's a fight for mom, and it doesn't, don't piss mom off. It will not work out. Yes, sir.
I just want to quickly close the circle, come back to performance once more. I've noticed your reference platform was kind of a multi-core system, where if you don't have really any means to program that in JavaScript, was that an issue at all, not having parallel primitives, or?
To us, to me, it more was a description about the expectation for performance out of it. You're right, today we don't have the mechanisms to do that. My expectation is that will change. Also, we have had some luck at doing some tricks that maybe let us get more out of course. So the answer is we think in the long term that Java needs to be able to address multi-core performance. The fact that it doesn't today is not prohibiting us. Even the single core version of that we can get a lot out of, but by asking for multiple cores, it leaves our future open. We have too many of our architectures that are multiprocessor by nature to give that up yet. Yeah. Thanks a lot for all your help. Hopefully you have a good show. I'll see you around. Thanks.